Introduce yourself. What's your name?
My name is Massaya Yumeds. Just a normal old man.
How long have you been drifting?
It's a bit of a weird story because I was doing some RC drifting for about 4 or 5 years, about 20 years ago. Took quite a long break, and then I've been back in it for about 3 or 4 years since, maybe 4 or 5.
What's your earliest memory of picking up the RC hobby?
So RC-wise, I started when I was maybe 10, 11 years old. There was a local racetrack near me. We used to race buggies, and I got really into that during my teen years, early 20s. It kind of faded a little bit as I graduated from university and had to go and live in the real world for a little bit, but it's always been an interest of mine. I've always been around cars, motorsport, so this has been a nice extension of that.
What first got you into RC drifting, and how did your setup evolve over time?
Okay, so in the early days, as I said, I was doing some RC racing, and then I was involved in full-size cars and the drift scene around that as well. So in the infancy of the UK drift scene, I was sort of part of that sort of thing back in 2005, 2006, that kind of thing. And so it sort of was a natural thing when I found out that RC drifting was a thing for me to give that a go. It was pretty primitive back then. It was basically whatever four-wheel drive race car you could get your hands on. They would stick some rock hard tires on it and sort of skid them around. It was more like ice rally type stuff in terms of how the cars moved. So from there, it's a night and day difference. The way that the technology moved on, it's so much closer to full-size cars, how they move nowadays. So that's really the main thing that got me back into it. When I saw the evolution of what happened in the 10, 15 years that I'd not been around, I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting to me again, and got me back into it.
What do you enjoy most about RC drifting?
I think it's twofold. The social aspect is really nice. When you're racing, during the racing, it's very intense. Whereas for drifting, there's a competitive side to it as well, but you can do it fairly relaxed. You can be chatting to your friend. The driving time is much, much longer. But also, in comparison to full scale stuff, one, it's not a cheap hobby, but it's much, much cheaper than burning actual fuel and tires. And also, I quite like, even though you've scaled it down, trying the things that would be really costly and dangerous to do in full size, you can attempt that in RC, and if you can pull it off, it's almost as fun, but it's much, much less risk. So I think those things really add up. The physics of how you tinker, how you adjust cars, the engineering principles behind it all translate exactly over. So the scale might be smaller, but all of the thinking and the way that you go about the process is very much the same.
You mentioned competition driving. Do you like it, and could you tell me more about it?
It's something that I've done in the past. It's something that I think, for me, because I want to develop as a driver and in my knowledge in terms of setting up the cars and things like that in as many different directions as possible. So I see the competitive side as an element that helps me complete and be a well-rounded driver and mechanic. So I like that. I like that sense of pressure once in a while, maybe not all the time, but it really does test who you are in that one moment if you can do it under pressure. So I think it doesn't have to be everything. I try not to make it my everything, but it's something I'm getting back into again, and I'm quite enjoying.
How much does it really cost to get started into RC drifting, honestly?
This is the trap, is that the cheapest thing that you can buy, I think a lot of the time, is adequate as a toy, but if you're in any way going to get into it, you'll be soon replacing it. And then there is this really nice big field of mid-range equipment which is absolutely adequate. And then there's the vanity stuff at the high end, which is nice to have, and yes, it can give you some advantage, but is it essential? Absolutely not, right? So in terms of actual numbers, the used market is so good for this kind of thing, because if you're trying to get into it and you aren't sure that it's your thing, and you want decent enough equipment that you can say that you gave it a fair shot without having to spend too much money, I would say somewhere in the regions of £400 or £500 should be enough to have you in a reasonable place to having given it a proper shot. The only difficulty with RC drifting compared to RC racing or other things is that how you drive and the techniques involved aren't necessarily intuitive. So more important than the equipment that you've got is to come to places like here, speak to people who know what they're doing, because if you can't drive your car around the track, is it a driver issue? Is it a car issue? You don't know because you don't have that experience. So it's really important that then somebody else could drive it and go, actually, no, this car is fine. It's a you thing. This is how you should practice. This is how you should train and become a better driver. Or actually, no, the car does have issues. Let's sort that out for you. And the people here will be able to do that. So, I mean, budget-wise, it can be, it's not a cheap hobby to get into. But also, that infrastructure is, I think, important because, just doing a few skins in a car park here and there will only last for so long. When you've got the constraints of an actual track and you're trying to stay within a certain place, and then also comparing yourself to others, even if you're not being competitive, when you're driving around other people, you can see it's like, I want to be more like that person. I want my car to move more like this. So all these things, I think, are important. Sorry, I've skirted your original question, but it doesn't have to be as expensive as some people will tell you, but it's also not as cheap as some people will try and pretend it is.
Basing it off money, if money was no object, what is your dream RC drift build?
To be fair, it's probably close to what I've already done. I've done that sort of typical middle-aged thing of, oh, I've got a bit of spare money, I'll just buy all the stuff. So, I'm not one for changing things around all the time, but I did do that about 3 or 4 months ago, so fairly new build. So I'm running the Rev D MC3, which is the sort of darling car of the time at the moment, and there's a lot of good high-end equipment out there, of which I'm sort of using a lot of the flagship brands, Accuvancy, SCM Motor, Futaba, Servo Gyro, and things like that. So there's a lot of opinion on whether it's the best stuff out there, but it's sort of that stuff that is typically, checklist of what are the dream brands that most people go with. That's kind of where I've ended up. Yeah, to be honest, I don't feel like I need anything more than I've got.
Are you sponsored by particular companies? If not, what company or companies would you like to be sponsored by?
I don't have any sponsorship right now. It's absolutely fine from that perspective. As somebody who's been on the side of sponsoring people, I work in with cars and motorsport on a full-scale thing for my job. So the main thing that tends to happen is that you get tied into contractual things. There are things that you have to do for the rewards that you get back out of it and so on. Luckily for me, I don't find, now that I've got most of the equipment out, it isn't that expensive as a maintaining a type thing. Once you're there, the cost of consumables is pretty low and all these other things. So from that perspective, unlike full-scale and everything, I need a season worth of fuel, season worth of tires. All these things are big money. So I don't feel like I'm in a position where I need it to move ahead. I like the fact that I'm free to choose whatever equipment I want. If I tie up with one brand, I've got to use all of their stuff, right? So from that perspective, the fact that I could pick and choose what I want is kind of nice. If somebody wants to come over and say, I would like you to be a brand ambassador, and all the things they want me to do are in line with the things that I would want to do anyway, then absolutely fine. But it's kind of nice to be a privateer as it stands.
Have you done any RC drifting outside of the UK? And if you have, what are the differences? Could you walk me a bit through that?
Okay, I have not done too much outside of the UK. In the previous stint, about 15 years ago, I did an event or two out in Europe, in the Netherlands, long time ago. But it's the thing that I noticed most is the slight approaches to, for example, how they like their tracks to flow and things like that. And you'll see that as a cultural difference. Even without being there physically, now with social media, you get to see how the continental US do things, how the continental Europe does things slightly different to the UK, how they're doing things in Asia, especially in Japan, which a lot of people take their influences from. And I think some of the emphasis on what the most important things or what they're trying to achieve, how they build the tracks to get that are all things that are important. But then also the scale is important. I think, in the UK we're still growing as a hobby here. So here we have one of the larger tracks, but it's not permanent here. So a lot of the tracks that run in halls like this are maybe half the size, 2/3 of the size. And as a result, the track layouts that you can run are quite different. And so the style of driving that it cultivates is also different. And I think that is the difference that you get to see, is that in America, space is less of a premium. So they're able to run these bigger layouts. And as a result, the car setup and the way that they drive suits those bigger things. The way that, in Europe, we tend to drive probably to try more accurate, smaller tracks because of the nature of the tracks that are born. But then, even in a small space, the philosophy of what kind of corners you put into that same space, like rather than just jamming it full of lots of little corners, to just have a couple of good flowing corners if you're trying to cultivate, high speed control or other things like that. These are all factors in how people build it, but it doesn't necessarily tie up that whoever's making the track and the layout might not be the person who's most knowledgeable about what kind of track there might be. At the end of the day, the person who got off their bum, put the track down, organized all that stuff, they're the ones that get the say on these things. And, in all fairness, the scene is pretty good that if somebody goes, I reckon this track would be better if we did this and that. Most people tend to look at doing those things, and when they look to make those progressions, because, they want to attract as many people to keep their clubs healthy. Not many people are doing this kind of thing for profit, so it can be a bit knife edgy for a lot of clubs to try and keep running to keep the costs down, because at the end of the day, we want to keep it affordable for as many people as possible. So going back to the original thing, I feel that the style of driving is very much reflected by the nature of the kind of tracks that can be built in each area.
How do you tune your car for different surfaces and track conditions?
Setup changing, I don't tend to change too much for myself. Like for me, the car, once it's relatively well balanced, I try to drive around most of it. If I'm trying to get competitive, then I'm seeing where everyone is at. There are a few things that you can start with in terms of how much traction that you want to try and gain if you're losing. The first thing is identifying where you're missing out. So is it the traction vertically, as in sending the car forwards? Is it the traction horizontally in the middle of the corner, and all these other things? And depending on each of those scenarios, you've got a different way of looking at trying to address those things. But on a day like today, for example, where I'm not trying to drive to be competitive or anything, a lot of the time I won't worry too much, just sort of try and drive around it as much as I can. But in the early days, when you're setting up the car, I tried absolutely anything and everything just to have been through it all, but it's pretty much settled now. The most prominent thing I change is the gear ratio of the car, depending on the speed of the general layout. On a bigger track with more flowing corners, I might gear up for more wheel speed, more vehicle speed, and on the tighter ones, I might come down. And that's the main thing that I'll change. Most of it, I found, is pretty well balanced now.
Okay. What's the most challenging drift technique to master, and how did you learn it?
They're all pretty challenging, because like the most challenging is the first one that you learn. Like, when you can't do it at all, just getting to grips with. There are a few things that are very counterintuitive about RC drifting. You need to let the gyro, do its work. So as the car rotates, if you're used to full scale drifting or anything like that, you want to instantly counter steer the car, because if you're even a fraction of a second late on it, your car's spinning out. Whereas in RC, you can lean on the gyro to catch that side of it, and you're not trying to make too many corrections at first. So that was, in terms of most challenging for me, I think that initial resetting my brain in order to be able to drive like that was hardest. But nowadays for me, like anytime I start on a day, even if it's a track layout I've been to before, it's always like, what's the fastest point of the track? Normally, like there's some kind of straight or something where you're building up speed. You want to snap the car to as much angle as possible when you're going in, and that's the fastest point on the track. And for me, it is a game of how much faster can I go into it? How much more angle can I put into it to still carry enough speed out of it? So I'll be the one that you'll see that's hitting the wall every single time on that first corner, because I would rather do that a few times and then know my limit and draw it back. That's the beauty of RC, is that I can crash a few times, nothing hurts. If I did that in full scale, it's gonna hurt a lot more. It's gonna hurt my wallet mostly, but so these are the things that I try and do. People talk about trying to slow RC drifting down. I like it fast, not like insanely fast, but I want to feel like it's so fast that I'm struggling to control it, but somehow I am, because that being on the limit, on the edge, I think is, whether it's full scale drifting or RC drifting, if you're not floating around that, oh, am I going to spin out, am I not, then you're not driving hard enough as far as I see.
Can you walk us through your drift car setup? What are your favorite upgrades or must-have parts?
Okay, so to be honest, like the base setup of my chassis currently is pretty close to what's recommended from the manufacturer place. The base setting is there. I just make a few tweaks here and there based on things. My current setup thing that I'm really working on is allowing the front to roll with as little resistance as possible. So people talk about trying to gain speed by having the traction, so when the power is applied on the rear, it's pushing the car forwards. But more recently, I've been trying to reduce the resistance at the front end, make sure the alignment when you're on angle is correct in the way that nothing's dragging, it's going in the direction that I'm trying to send the car in. So that's what I've been looking at mostly, sort of just sweeping the steering, a couple of degrees at a time, and just, eyeballing it at first, but just seeing how the angles are changing, sort of compressing the car a little bit. These are the things of RC drifting that, again, are really easy to do, is that you can simulate the full stroke of the car, the full thing, without, relatively little effort. You don't have to put tons of weight on the car in order to compress the car and see what it's going to do in terms of alignment. So it gives you a very clear, God view of these things. So I mean, that's the main thing. Now that as I said, now that I've settled on most of the other portions of it being good, those are the kind of things I'm fiddling with. And to be honest, for the most part, it's get to the track and check all the things that can vibrate and shake loose are not loose, because I find that, more times than not, if my car doesn't feel right, it's not that the setup was wrong, it's just that something's maybe not broken, it's just a bit loose or not quite right. Tighten it up, screw it back in, everything's good again. So that, maintenance is possibly more important than setup.
Burn tuning, and what's the controversy?
Burn tune is, in my opinion, a fad. I think it's going to come and go. There's a lot of people who are, they're trying to spin their rear wheels as fast as possible, and the theory apparently is that it generates more temperature and therefore more traction. But I'm not convinced that there's enough of a difference. I've played with the concept a little bit more wheel speed can help in places, but if coefficient frictions and slip angles and all these other physical things are to be believed, there's a point where once something's spinning beyond a certain amount, then the amount of friction it can generate is less. So I'm not convinced by it. Something similar I've tried, maybe I'm not doing it right to get a big enough effect out of it. But I mean, the biggest controversy is is more so that if your wheels are spinning 3 times faster on the floor, then it's potentially wearing out somebody's track 3 times as fast. And I think it was the track owners that were more concerned about it than whether it actually gave an advantage or not.
I see.
Because so far there's not been any real clear, decisive, like, well, if you're not doing it, you're not winning. If you are doing it, you are winning. So it's not there yet, but it does seem to be the case that it's, that was the case in Japan when it first picked up. It was the tracks that didn't like it more than the competitors that were trying to compete against it.
In your opinion, why is RC drifting so addictive?
I think it's, once you're there and in it, it is possibly one of the most accessible things to do. If you go to an RC race meeting, for example, then you could be there for the whole day and you'll do maybe 25, 30 minutes of driving. Because in electric classes anyways, you run for about 5 minutes at a time and you'll do 5 or 6 rounds, including a round of practice, some rounds of qualifying, and a couple of final races. Here, you could spend 45 minutes on the track at a time and casually just driving around. It's not that competitive thing, but I think in terms of the amount of time you're on the track for the amount of time you're at the track, the ratio is really, really good. I think another thing is that full-scale drift is accessible but very difficult. One, if you're young, then you're not going to be driving that much. 2, you normally need a second car. Most people don't have a place to put that, or might not be able to afford X thousands of pounds in order to buy a second car. So I think modeling is as much about that fantasy portion of it, and whether it's RC or trains or whatever, like ask any model train enthusiast, would you like to own and run a full-scale train? I'm sure they would say yes, but they'll also tell you why it's impractical and there for them, and why modeling is the way that they like to do it. And I think RC drift is similar to that. Drifting as a sport in the last 25 years or so has exploded to the point where it's mainstream now as an extreme sport. It sits alongside skateboarding, snowboarding, rollerblading, BMX, and all these things as a quote-unquote cool thing in that extreme. So being able to simulate that without going the whole hog, I think is a really viable option for a lot of people. I think that's mostly what might be the thing, because there's a lot of people here today that will be into RC drifting and might not follow the full scale stuff, which has always been a surprise for me. Is that because I got into it because I like the real cars. Well, no, these are real cars, they're big cars. And the idea that some people are now getting into the RC first and then getting into the full scale, it's, everything's come full circle in 20-something years. It's quite interesting.
What is one piece of advice you'd give to someone thinking about joining the hobby today?
Don't buy anything yet. Find a place to go and drive. And go there, speak to the people, see what they're running. Regardless of whether it's the best thing or not, if you are running the same equipment or the same base stuff as the experienced and most importantly helpful people at your local club, then they can give you direct advice on what worked for them, and they know exactly how your car and your equipment is going to work. Your buying decisions, in my opinion, should be closer to that than what you saw on the internet, what you like the vibe of. That's also really cool, but if you don't know what you're basing those opinions on, a lot of the time, it's just whoever's got the best marketing. So that would be the number one thing, is go seek your club out first. A lot of the time, those kind of clubs might have a rental car or something that you can try. Then you know for sure if it's something you want to get into, because the last thing we want is people to put a good chunk of money into something, try it a couple of times and go, hey, it's not for me. And then they have to go through the rigmarole of trying to sell it on. They'll never get back all the money that they put into it. So any experience that can give you those tasters into knowing the investment you're going to make is definitely something that you are not going to regret, I'd say is the main thing. If you don't have that luxury of being, and you're in just an open bit of tarmac or whatever to go and drive by yourself, the thing that I would say is make sure you set a course. Don't just go round in circles. Find some way, put some cones or something down, markers down, in order for you to find something to aim for, to trace, because then you've got some tangible things to measure what you're trying to achieve. It's not just a car that's floating around on a piece of tarmac. So I say for anybody starting out, those are the things that I would recommend.
Thank you very much for your time.
No problem, thank you.